Laurie Huston's News for the Heart is dedicated to helping you give a voice to your own soul. Our hearts have the power to free us from pain and the struggles that keep us from awakening to our true essence. Join Laurie now as we delve into our heart and soul to find the path that will open us to the possibilities and lead us to the life we love to live.
And good afternoon. This is News for the Heart. Well, it's the last Tuesday in January of 2024. You believe it? Which is almost the last day. We've got one more day. Well, and because it's the last Tuesday, we have our awesome co-host, Tom Campbell, with us. Always awesome to have you on the show, Tom. And last year we did a really fun show called What is Love? And we discussed all the definitions, and we really tried to make clear what love is and what love isn't. So this year, just because it's been very much a topic that keeps coming up, and I keep seeing it even in my own life, and it's about communication. It's like people would rather break up than communicate. We have, relationships are challenging. They're messy. They're beautiful. They're amazing. But communication seems to be that one place that, I don't know, we struggle with. It's people feel vulnerable, and then they think vulnerability is a weakness, where I think it's a strength. But it's like, well, if I pour out my heart and then they don't accept it, then I'm being rejected, even though that's what they think. That's not really what's happening, because it's the other person that has the issue, not you. So let's just chat about love in its many splendid forms and how to communicate, because we're having real issues with communication. So welcome to the show, Tom.
Hey, well, thank you, Laurie. It's always fun to be here on the last Tuesday of the month and chat with you. This is the soft side of MBT, yeah. And actually, this is probably the most important side of MBT. The science side is kind of the hard side, and that's important in its own way. But relationship and connections and people and life, that I think is probably more important. So I like these talks that we have, and so do most of the people that make comments, yeah, and that I hear from. So yeah, this is a very popular show amongst the MBTers, and I suspect it is amongst your group as well. It is. So that's a good subject to talk about. Why is it so hard to just tell the truth?
Right?
Why is it so hard to just explain how you feel? And the reason it's so hard, of course, you mentioned that it's fear. People are afraid that if they tell the truth, it won't be accepted. That if they tell the truth, the other person will want to tell them why that's the wrong truth, or why that isn't the way it is, or fix them. And they don't really want an argument about their problems at that point. So I think it's that basic fear. And you said that's vulnerability. Well, vulnerability is fear. If you feel vulnerable, then that means you feel like you could be hurt. Well, that's fear. So there's a couple of things involved in it. One is a strategy that people have to deal with fear. And it's a very common strategy. And the strategy is very simple. It's, if I don't play, I can't lose. And, that sounds like, well, okay, right. If you don't play, you won't lose. But you also won't win, or you won't anything else. And in the long run, if you don't play, you'll always lose, because that's the game here of life. You have to play. If you don't play, you lose. So that strategy is a failed strategy, but people use it anyway. They don't want to go someplace that they think might hurt, or might end up being negative, or might end up going someplace that makes the relationship even worse. So that's one thing. That strategy is used, all the time. I don't want to, socialize because I'm afraid that, if I do, I'll run into people I won't like, or people won't like me, or, I won't have any fun. So you make up reasons why you don't want to go to the party. You don't want to have people over, you just want to sit in your little hidey hole and kind of not interact that much with people, because people are difficult and people have problems, and people are not always nice and warm and cuddly. And I'd rather just avoid all that. So, I can't lose if I don't play. So I'm just not going to play. And then I won't lose anything. I won't gain anything either, but I won't lose anything. So that's the attitude.
Very
And it's,
lonely though.
it's very lonely. And what it is you do lose,
Yeah.
that's being here, interacting with people, is where all of our growth comes from. If you withdraw from that, you don't grow either. And it's more likely you will tend to sink into self-referential, uh, thinking, which means it's all about you, kind of fall into being self-centered. That will grow more because everything's about you, because you don't interact outside, with others so much. So you do lose. You stop growing. And when you stop going forward with your growth, you have a tendency to go backward with your growth, which is the thing that most people don't really understand. If you're not actively going forward, you're probably slip sliding away, going backwards. So you have to be active. You have to be engaged. You have to be connected. You have to be a part of what's happening. Otherwise, you start slip sliding away. But people are afraid that if they just told the truth, it would create a problem. That the truth is more than that other person wants to hear. And that's because they themselves are probably a bit self centered. Almost everybody in our culture is a bit self centered, so that's not like calling names. That's pretty much saying that's the boat we're all in. People are self centered. It's about them. And they believe that, of course, other people are just like them, which means they think other people are self centered too, and it's about them. Well, if you get two people that are self centered, then telling the truth is not such an attractive thing, because telling the truth, you're really spilling out something that's private about you. And if the other person is self centered, what good's that going to do? They're going to criticize you or tell you how it is you need to do it better, or that you shouldn't feel that way. And those feelings are silly, or some other kind of thing, because in their mind, it's all about them, and they want you to be the way that would make them feel better. So they don't feel that the other person is really going to listen or care or empathize or understand, or even just allow them to feel that way and say, okay, those are your feelings. I'm not going to criticize them. I'm not going to say why you shouldn't have them or what's wrong with them or anything, but just accept it and say, all right, you feel that way. Thank you, for letting me know, because now maybe I'll act different or be different because I know you feel that way. Well, that's somebody who's not so self-centered. That's somebody who is interested in that other person, not just themselves. So when you have a lot of people who are generally self-centered, you'll have a lot of people who generally don't want to share, don't want to open themselves up, because they feel that they likely will just be criticized or be told how to fix themselves, not just appreciated that this is how they feel and understood as a human being, that we allow other people to be who they are, rather than, we're all teachers and we all teach everybody else how everybody else should be. If you say, oh, really, I feel so sad because such and such and such. And I say, well, you shouldn't feel sad because of that. You should this and this and that. Well, that's not helpful. You see, that's me teaching you how you should be. Well, if everybody's kind of like that, then, communication always stays superficial, and everybody's afraid to take it down to the level where it's really meaningful because they don't want to be told how to fix it. They understand it's a problem. They know it's an issue. They know it doesn't feel good. And if they could just fix it by, oh, I see, I should do that, and then that would fix it. Well, they would have fixed it a long time ago. This is something they're struggling with because of some deep issues and things that they have, and that the other person's not going to appreciate that, or let them have that, or let it be, or just understand it, or deal with it. The other person's going to try to fix it, or tell them that it's not really like that at all, and it's just not helpful. So the reason we have so much trouble communicating is because we're so self-centered, all of us. And when you're with people who are mostly self-centered, being honest and truthful, at a deep level, is generally doesn't work very well. Because if you pour out some kind of thing the way you feel, and somebody else tells you that that's just stupid to feel that way, or that you shouldn't feel that way, look, here's some good arguments of why you shouldn't feel that way, and here's how you should feel better. You need to go do this. If that's what you get is Mr. Fix It or Mrs. Fix It, they're not really understanding where you are and what you're doing. They see you only from their perspective. And from their perspective, you would be better if you didn't feel that way, or if you didn't feel bad about that thing or something else. So better not to say anything, better just to keep it to yourself. So we don't communicate famously, look at all the various movies, almost all the movies that have to do with boy girl, or a romance or something. And it all hinges on miscommunication. The whole plot almost always just hinges on miscommunication. She feels this way, but he doesn't understand that. And he feels that way, and she doesn't understand what that means. And it's all about miscommunication. Well, that's because that's our life. That's the way people feel, and they can relate to that miscommunication. And when you're watching that movie, you say, well, why don't you just tell her? Why doesn't she just tell her that would fix the whole thing? But that's only in our imagination that it'll fix the whole thing. Most of the time, it doesn't fix the whole thing. It just creates another issue. So, all right, I was having trouble with my significant other. I was honest, and she told me that, my feelings were invalid, and what I should do is drink more water, or something. And, that doesn't help. So now I've just become more of a problem. Before I was, at this level of problems, and now I'm just one more level beneath that with more problems because I just shared it. And it's not what my partner wants to hear. And from my partner's viewpoint, what's only important is what they want. And if I share something that they don't want, then that puts distance between us. So when we change, when we grow up to the point that we actually care about other people, and we don't try to fix everyone, but we try to understand everyone. Instead of fixing, we want understanding. And also that we have compassion for everyone. We not only do we understand them, but we realize that this is a serious problem or issue or thing that they have fear wrapped around. And they're struggling with that fear. And how can we help them deal with that fear better? And it doesn't matter whether we think the fear's silly or not. That's not the point. It's not the point at all. Or that the fear is something they got when they were 5 years old and didn't get that teddy bear. It's that may all be silly, but that's not the point. The point, there's somebody who's having the problem, and how can we best help? How can we be in order to help them get over that problem? Or is there anything we can do to help? Or maybe just listen. Maybe the best thing we could do is just listen and understand and make sure that we don't poke at that problem, that we don't irritate that problem, that we don't exacerbate it with the things that we don't intend to exacerbate the problem. We don't even know the problem's there. But we could think a little bit about how we might have been exacerbating that problem or adding to it, or have become a part of it, and how we could change in order to be helpful. You see, not how they could change to make our life better, but how could we change to be helpful to them? But see, most people aren't interested in changing themselves. They would like the other person to change so they don't have to.
Right.
So that's why it's not just, the fact that we don't communicate is just a symptom of a general level of self-centeredness, a lack of growth, a lack of being loved. And it can't really be fixed until we change who we are. So, it's such an obvious problem. Everybody knows it's an obvious problem. You can't watch a movie or read a book without realizing that that's the obvious problem, is that people aren't communicating. And if you look at your own life, there's things you don't share. You don't share how you feel, because if you shared that, they may not like it, or it may be a problem. And you're not at all sure that they're going to be sympathetic or empathetic or try real hard to see what they can change to help. Instead, they're going to tell you what you should change in order to help, which isn't helpful at all. You see? So everybody's kind of in that same boat. We can't talk to each other because we're not grown up enough to respond with love and with caring. So if you want to share something with somebody and they're incapable of responding with love and caring, well, you just keep your mouth shut. You don't share with that person. And the problem is then, of course, that if people did speak up, even at the low quality of consciousness out there, they probably would feel better, and it would probably help more than it would hurt. Sometimes it would hurt the relationship, but most often it wouldn't. It would actually help. And it would help the two people grow up some. All right, Joe just told me that he's got this fear that, if he told the truth, that you wouldn't like him. So he doesn't tell you that truth. He keeps that secret. But that makes him act in ways that you don't like. You see? And you don't know why he acts like that, but it's just a little annoying to you that he acts that way. So that's a negative. So he definitely now doesn't want to share that with you because it's a negative. And if he starts to talk about it, you're going to immediately start to complain. And you're going to want to tell him to get over it, fix it. Well, he doesn't know how to fix it or get over it. It's just the way he is. And he may not even know why he's like that, because he didn't remember he didn't get the teddy bear when he was 6 years old. He may not know why he's like that. So if he doesn't know, how are you going to help? It's better just to keep quiet and not say anything and, struggle on the way we're struggling on, than to get into some kind of worse situation where now we're kind of at odds with each other.
Right.
So that's why we're not grown up enough as a culture, as a people. We're not grown up enough to make people feel safe to be honest with us. That's the thing. So now, Laurie, you probably find that all kinds of people confide in you. People are all the time telling you, their deepest secrets, their fears, their problems, and that And matter of fact, you're like a magnet for that, that you meet people and within 10 minutes, they're dumping all of their all of their things, And that's
Grocery line.
yeah, even standing in the grocery line, right? So you would be like that because you put off that sense that you would have empathy. You would care. You're not going to be critical. You're not going to tell them that, they need to grow up or change or do anything. You're just going to give them some empathy and maybe even probably even sympathy along with the empathy. And you're going to try to say something nice, to make them feel better. So they get that. So they tell you, but they're not going to tell their husband. They're not going to tell their wife. They're not going to tell their friends, but they'll tell you because you don't judge. You just listen, you see. So you're a magnet for people. And you say, well, a lot of people tell me all kinds of things. Yes, but they can't tell the person that needs to know it, the person that needs to understand it.
Mm.
But when they run into somebody who is not judgmental, oh, the stuff just pours out. They want to tell somebody. Yeah, you see, I'm like that too. People will go up and talk with me, and in 4 or 5 minutes, they're telling me things that they never mentioned to anybody else because as they say things, I don't judge them. As they tell me a little bits of it, I don't judge them. So then they get braver, so they tell me more, and I still don't judge them. And pretty soon, it's they feel free because they're not getting judged. Well, most people aren't like that. And most people, particularly in their relationships, there's a lot on the line in the relationship. Okay, look at this relationship. You and your significant other, you get along, you like each other, you enjoy each other's company, and you don't want to lose that. It's real, it's important, it's significant. You don't want to go backwards in the relationship. You only want to go forwards. So you better be careful because you might say something that'll take it backwards. And you don't want that. That's the fear. It's the fear of being judged, not being understood, that the other person will not really understand and be supportive. They'll understand and be non-supportive, tell you how to get over it, what you should do about it, why you're being silly, and so on, rather than understanding that it's an important thing to you. It's kind of a general attitude when somebody says something about the way they feel. Oh, I feel, such and such. And people look at that, judge it according to their own experience, and then pronounce judgments. Oh, that's silly. You shouldn't feel that way. I mean, how many times, do people say that?
Just get over it.
Yeah.
Just get over it. Yeah, it's true.
Oh, I don't like that store. It just feels creepy to me, and I never go in there to buy anything. I won't go into that store. And people who go to that store all the time say, "That's stupid. It's a perfectly nice place. Okay, the lighting isn't all that bright. It's a little dim in there, but other than that, there's no problem." Well, so they just discount it
Right.
and judge that person as lacking. Whereas maybe that person had a really horrible encounter in a very dim place at one time, and that's what it reminds them of. And they don't even remember that, but it's scary to them for some reason. And the point is, when somebody tells you things like that, some of their feelings, it doesn't matter whether they're rational or not. If it's totally irrational, that's irrelevant. That's the way that person feels. Rational or not, that's important to that person. And to just be told that they're silly isn't helpful. That's judging them without understanding them. If you knew that when they were 5 years old, they were in a dim place and somebody grabbed them or something happened or their big brother jumped out from behind the refrigerator and scared them half to death. And even though it was just a joke, they remember that terror and they associate it with dim lighting. There's something going on there. And you need to allow that to be, and allow that to be important to them. And if they're important to you, then that should also be important to you. And you need to think about that and make sure the lights are always bright, and whatever, rather than just say, well, that's stupid. It's just, you're going to waste electricity, get over it. See, that's the self-centered attitude. But other-centered lets you accept other people's things that don't make sense to you. Let them not make sense to you. Everybody doesn't have to make sense to you. But it's okay. They are just however they are. Here's somebody who's afraid to, maybe wear a certain color. Well, that's silly. You mean you can't wear blue? That's absurd. Get over it. Self-centered attitude. Oh, really? Blue? What kind of blue? What shades of blue? And what do you feel like when you see blue? And do you know where that came from? And that kind of thing, where you take them seriously and accept that that's just the way they are, and that's okay. You can still have a wonderful relationship with somebody who's afraid of blue. It's not like that makes them a defective. Yes, they have this trait. And give that trait your respect, not your scorn. See, that's the difference between other-centered and self-centered. If you're self-centered, you judge everybody else according to yourself. Well, I'm not afraid of blue, therefore you're stupid if you're afraid of blue. See?
Yeah, and I'm going to paint the walls blue, and I'm only going to wear blue from now on. So there.
Yeah, right. That'll show you. That'll help you get over it.
Right?
Right. Yeah, that'll help you get over it. Right. So you see, that's why everybody can't communicate, because they're afraid to communicate, because they're afraid that it'll turn out badly, because the times they've tried to communicate, more often than not, it comes out badly. It comes off badly. They tried to communicate to their teachers at school, to their parents, and it came out badly. They were just told to suck it up, don't be silly, go do what I want you to do. They were basically brushed aside and told to don't feel that way. Well, if you feel that way, you feel that way. Being told to skip it and don't, it's just not helpful. So that's why they have in their life, probably mostly as youngsters, mostly with their parents, been, they found out that if they're honest and they tell people about how they feel in certain ways, they'll just get, scoffed at, they'll get put down, they'll be told it's silly, or somebody will tell them what it is they need to do to fix that problem. But nobody really just sits down with them and says, tell me about it. How do you feel? How is that? And oh, I'm sorry, I got a blue thing here. I'll take that blue tie off. I'll put it in my pocket because I don't want to, trigger this thing that you have. Rather than get over it, I got a blue tie on, and that's all right. There's nothing wrong with blue ties. So, you just need to grow up and get over that. You see, it's that attitude of not caring about other people, being too self-centered to really, have empathy for somebody and to let somebody be however they are. That's the problem. Now, the other problem, and of course, you mentioned that men particularly have this problem of not being very forthwith with their feelings. Well, that's because men are taught as boys from a very early age to, suck it up, cupcake.
Boys don't cry.
Your feelings are not important. And they take that in and they feel that way. So they keep it to themselves. And around other men, other males, if they were to say things like that, they would just be laughed at, scoffed at. They'd be made the butt of the joke. The men would be relentless in their negativity and putting that person down because they violated the rules and said something, about their feelings or whatever. And that's against the rules. You don't go there. You keep that to yourself. You deal with your own personal stuff. We've got work to do. Keep your stuff to yourself. And that's just the culture that men grow up in.
How did that happen though? Like how? Why? I mean, where did I don't quite understand. I mean, it's not like I guess girls were sort of taught to, you know, feel and be intuitive but why were boys what was the great problem with
I think the problem is that
you have to work because you have to just do
you
it.
have you have to work together. They were always either in war together or in trying to survive together. Each guy had his own job to do. Everybody depended on everybody else doing that job. And anything that takes your focus off the job you have to do is not good. You need to be focused. All your personal stuff, stuff it under the rug, put it someplace where it doesn't bother you. That's your business, but it doesn't belong here. Whereas females don't have that sort of thing. They tend to be more sociable. They, the girls all, when they're young, have girl gangs, they hang out with other girls, they share, they have friends, the friends are important. Guys don't have those kinds of relationships with other guys. It's more rare for guys to have really close friends that are guys. They have a lot of acquaintances. They have guys they do things with, guys they go fishing with, or guys they go hiking with, or things like that. But that's a pals kind of a thing. That has nothing to do with what's under the hood, with what's, deeper down. And those things are hardly ever talked about. And it's, what do they call that? I think with women, they call it own group preference, that they have
That's true.
they have a connection with their own sex, and women have an own group preference where having a female friend that you can talk to is an important part of the female experience. It's not a part at all of the male experience. Also, men were pretty expendable, particularly long time back. And if you had really good friends and a lot of emotional attachments, those would end up being a problem because a lot of guys didn't live very long. It was a very violent, very rough place, and they had all the dangerous jobs. They were out, and part of the fighting or part of the, securing, got to get that cave, got to get that bear out of the cave so we can live in that cave, that sort of thing. They had those kinds of tasks to do, so they didn't live as long. And when you do your job may well be fatal. And you may know that, and everybody else may know that, but you do your job anyway. You have to have that kind of an attitude. And that attitude is one of very tight focus and not dealing in the emotional world. You have to it's just the hard world of fact is what you deal in. So men are more that way. Now, it doesn't mean that they can't be emotional. They can't, they can do all those things too. They're human. They have all that same stuff, but they're more inclined push that sort of stuff down, not deal with it, not share. It's not good. But in relationship, now you see it's a different thing. If you had trust in your person you were talking to, even in your significant other, if you had trust that they would respond in a positive way and it would end up being a good thing, then you could get the courage to to say those things, to discuss those things that are kind of a deep part of you that you keep to yourself. But if you're not quite sure that you trust them that much and it might turn out to be something bad, well, something bad is something to be avoided. So even if it's just a 10% chance that it would turn out bad, not worth the risk. Rather, keep it the way it is. Well, mostly that's because they're overestimating the difficulty if it doesn't work well. They're overestimating that if it doesn't work well, it's going to be a really, really bad thing that will cause problems forever. And typically it's not, that way. And people are generally self-centered, yes, but mostly they also care about other people and they do want to be helpful. And people, it's not like people walking around are all evil. It's not like that at all. Well, most people are nice and they try to be nice and they try to be helpful and so on. It's just we're not all that grown up yet. And people's worry, their fears kind of makes that possibility of it going wrong bigger than it really is. So the possibility of it going wrong is maybe a small problem, but they see it as a big problem. It's an unknown and don't, it's just easier not to go there. So that's kind of the way it is.
You talked about the girl groups and yeah, it's funny because whenever I'm in a group of girls, usually it's a lot of gossip and it's a lot about how the other person is doing something that they don't like. It's not usually, oh yes, pouring their hearts out about their own fears.
But within the girl group, within that group, it's kind of understood that you'd be nice and supportive of the people in your group. But the people that are out of your group, well, now, those people are the ones you talk about they're the ones doing everything wrong and awful. So that's the way those groups work. Those groups are say, okay, we'll all be nice to each other in this group, but we don't have to be nice to anybody outside the group. That's those little girl groups are like that. And when men group up, they tend to challenge each other all the time. That's part of the way they socially interact. The girls all get together and say, well, let's all be nice to each other, but we'll pick on everybody else. The guys get together. If some guy says something that's a little off or a little whatever, everybody else jumps on him and makes fun of him right away. That's to be expected. And that's the way guys interact, is they instantly challenge anything that's off kilter or comes out that it's not right or sounds a little goofy or something. If they're not just exactly the way they're supposed to be, then they get called out and made fun of and, a lot of jokes but they're used to that. So it's not something that's really all that upsetting. They laugh, okay, you guys got me this time, and they laugh along with it. And, but it's, for women looking at a bunch of guys interacting, it almost seems hostile in that they're always putting each other down. They're always making fun of each other.
Very competitive.
Very, it's competitive, but it's, you show no mercy. Mercy is for sissies. There is no mercy. So when somebody says something and everybody, says something that they did that was stupid or something, everybody laughs at them and they spend the next 5 minutes just, roasting that person over that gaffe. But guys really don't mind that so much. They expect that. They expect that sort of thing. But when people tend to see the rest of the world from their own vantage point. So men tend to look at what women are doing and saying, and they interpret it as if those women were men, because that's the way men think. So when they what do we call it? Rib or make fun of or whatever. If they do that with a woman, she gets really upset about it. And they can't understand that because she's supposed to laugh and then say something, you know, take a hit back, say something clever back. And that's supposed to be fun. And it's not fun between a man and a woman when he does that. And he gets caught and doesn't know why that doesn't work, because it's not his reality. So there's a lot of things between men and women that are just women think that, men will act and say things like women. Men think that women are going to thinking and like men, and they don't. They're totally different. And that creates a lot of the problems where men will make very light of something or whatever that's very serious to a woman and she gets upset. Well, making light of something is just what guys do. If somebody else says something, you turn it into a joke, and mostly the jokes are put down jokes between men, and the men enjoy that in their own way. That's just what the society of men are like. But you try a put down joke on a lady and you just thrown gasoline on a fire, and that doesn't work. So part of the problem is that men don't really understand women. They think they tend to expect them to act more like men. And then when they don't, they think, oh, well, they're irrational because, of course, however you are, that's rational. And if anybody's different, they're irrational. And women feel the same thing about the men. Those men, they're so goofy. They're so irrational. So it's, talk about not being able to share, not being able to say what you think. We have basic problems, even just living together, communicating, because we don't have an appreciation for other, because we're so wrapped up in ourselves. We don't take the time to think, what is that other person thinking and feeling? What's important to them? How do they see the world? What's their viewpoint? Let me look through their eyes for a while and see how they see life. And if you had those kinds of interests, then everything would be so much easier and your relationships would all get so much better. But that requires you to think about other people. No. That requires you to understand and care about what other people are thinking, instead of just judging them as being silly or immature or whatever. So that's why this world is so messed up in the region of relationships. We just don't understand each other very well, and that's because we're too self-centered. It's about us, and we don't take the time or have the inclination or really care enough to think, how does that other person feel, and not judge their feeling. Just accept that that's the way they feel. For whatever the reason is, it doesn't matter. That's the way they feel. And then you have to deal with that in a positive way. And that's something that just doesn't happen that often. We're too much wrapped up in our own needs and our own wants and how we'd like people to interact and how we'd like people to be. Women would like men to act more like women, and men would like women to act more like men, rather than us really understanding what the other's like and why they feel that way. We just wish that they would act the way we act, because that would make it a lot easier for us, and it's really about us anyway. So making it easier for us is really what we're all about. You see? So it's a very endemic issue, but it's almost funny. When you see it in particularly like the romantic comedies, it's almost funny how people refuse to say something, to say the truth, when the truth would fix the problem. The truth would solve all the issues, but they just can't say it. And it's almost amusing to watch the dance of people dancing around the truth, not wanting to say what they really feel. And particularly with guys, often they don't know really what they feel because they don't deal in the emotional space so much as females do. Females are more aware of how they feel and why they feel that way. Men are not. So if you ask a man, well, how do you feel about that? Mostly the guy will just kind of stop, like, huh? How do I feel about that? Uh, well, they'll think about it a while and then they'll tell you something that comes out of their intellect that doesn't have anything at all to do with their feeling. But that's the way they think they should feel about that because they really don't know how they feel about things. They don't think about it. Now, it doesn't mean they don't have feelings. They have lots of feelings, but the feelings all live in feeling space. They don't live in intellectual space. So they don't really understand where they come from or why they're like that. And they don't really question it. It's just the way it is. And if you ask them about it, they have no idea why they feel like that. So they just make something up, a good story from the intellect that they think makes sense rather than really, oh, why do I feel like that? Where does that come from? Yeah, I do feel that way. And why? That kind of introspection is not all that natural to males, where it is more natural to females. So they don't really know why they feel the way they feel. But they know that if they have this feeling that if they were honest and straightforward, it would cause more trouble. It would not be understood. It would be misunderstood, taken the wrong way, and cause difficulties. And, at least some of the time, that's probably true. And vice versa. Women, if they were to be really, really honest, there's a fair possibility it will be misunderstood because the other person has never taken the time to understand that other person.
But let's face it, when we're we're in that case, we're not really expressing our feelings. We're expressing our dissatisfaction with the other person most of the time instead of actually expressing why we want something the way we want it and what it means to us and how we feel about it. We're usually going, well, you're doing this wrong instead of, so how can we work this together?
Yeah. Well, we need to talk in terms that are non-judgmental instead of, you're doing this wrong or I don't like you doing this. It needs to be when you do that, it makes me feel this way. You see, that's just a statement of fact. When you do that, that makes me feel like this. And of course, the other person says, well, that's goofy. Why would you feel like that? Well, that's at least an opening, but they shouldn't start it with that's goofy. You see, that's what they're thinking, but they should think, well, that's just a fact. He or she is just telling me that is how that makes them feel. Now deal with that as a fact. Don't judge it as a wrong, a wrongness. They shouldn't feel that way or shouldn't think that way. Judge it as a fact. They do feel that way. They do think that way. Now, how can I deal with that?
Right.
See, that's the difference. Though you don't start out, you're doing something wrong. You say, when you do this, I feel this way about it. That makes me feel small, or that makes me feel unappreciated, or that makes me feel whatever it does. And if they start to judge that feeling, you just say, I don't know, where it comes from. It's just how I feel. I don't know exactly why it makes me feel that way, but just the sum total of my life to this point has led me to this condition that's what it feels like. So please, be aware of that. That's all. Speak without judging, without saying that's wrong, that's stupid, you shouldn't feel like that, get over, suck it up, cupcake. All that stuff is judging the other person. Needs to change. You need to change. Well, that person probably does need to change. We all probably need to change. We can all grow up and change some, no doubt about it. But we don't like to be told to change. We like to be accepted the way we are. So it's how you phrase things. If it's judgmental, what you're doing is wrong, or that feeling is stupid, that's just judgmental. That's my judgment of what you're feeling. Well, my judgment of what you're feeling is irrelevant. What's relevant is you're feeling it. That's important. Why you're feeling it is not important. Doesn't matter. Maybe something happened to you when you were 6, or maybe it's just part of the way you are. Maybe you got that characteristic from your grandmother, Who knows? It just doesn't matter where it comes from. That's irrelevant. What's relevant is you feel that way when he does this or she does that, then it makes you feel this way. That's important. So you have to realize people are full of feelings for all kinds of strange reasons that aren't rational. Being rational is not a requirement. Being real is a requirement. So you understand that people, for the most part, are not rational. We think we're rational and everybody else should be rational too, but we're not rational. We just think we are, but we're not rational. And that is how we judge other people, whether we think, well, that's irrational, therefore it's wrong and you need to fix it. But that's just, again, self-centered. So that's the key. Caring about other people enough, letting other people be just as irrational as they need to be to be who they are. We're all full of irrational stuff. Humans are just very irrational beings. We don't do things because we think that that's the rational thing to do. We do whatever we feel like doing, and then we explain it as being rational. We make up a story that makes it sound rational. But mostly, we do things because we feel that it's the thing to do. We work out of our feelings, not out of our intellect, as far as what makes most of our choices. We choose out of feelings. But then when somebody says, well, why did you do that? Well, you'll think up some way to justify it. But the justification's mostly just BS. It's not really why you did anything. You did things because that's just the feelings, the underneath what's going inside, based on all the experiences you've had, the hurts you've had, the successes you've had, all of that comes together to make you. And that's why you make the choices, not because your intellect has decided that this choice is the correct action. That's just our pretense. We can make up stories on the spot really, really well, but they're almost never the truth. And we see them as true, but they're not true. Because to say, well, I did that just because that's what I feel like, that's what I felt, that seems weak. And, that's not somebody that doesn't sound very adult. Children do that. We have to pretend to be more sophisticated and rational. So that's another problem. Our need to pretend to be rational when we really aren't. And that's true for men just as well as women. Men and women are equally irrational. We don't think our way through choices. We feel our way through life. And that feeling is based on our experience. All the good and all the bad and all the movies we've seen and just everything. It's our experience. All the friends we've had, it all sums up to our experience. And that's why we make the choices we make. So we're very complicated. And we really don't know why we make a lot of the choices we make. It's just what we do, the way we feel. And we really don't like having to explain some rational reason for why we do that. We just like to be accepted that that's the way we are, and that's okay. We don't need a reason. You see, now that is a much deeper level of acceptance. When you can just be with another person and you don't have to pretend to be rational. You can just be you, and that's okay. See, now that we'd call that a very deep relationship with another person. Well, that's just another way of looking at the same problem we've been talking about. Have your relationships and don't worry about rationality. Just people have feelings which make them make choices, and explore the feelings. How does that make you feel? I notice when I talk about this, you get real quiet. How does that make you feel? And when you just say, oh, I don't know, just not interested, well, you're just sloughing that off. there's a reason why you're not interested. And if you can share that, find it out for yourself, and the women will have a lot easier time, I think, finding that out. I think the men are more distanced from their feelings. They more often don't have a clue of where a lot of their feelings come from. So, yeah, it's all about growing up, finding out who you are, being authentic, and caring about other people. So
Mm.
that's kind of the mess we're in right now, because most all of us are not grown up enough to not be judgmental. And we're afraid that the other person will be, and we're afraid that it'll hurt the relationship, and we don't want to hurt the relationship. But by not being honest, we are hurting the relationship. You see, that's the problem. And we're probably hurting it more by not being honest than we would if we just talked. We just said what we were like, what we wanted, and we'd surprise each other. We'd really surprise each other. But we also have to have a big enough reality that we can just accept that. Say, well, that sounds really bizarre. I never would have thought of that, but okay, if that's the way it is, then that's the way it is. And please help me, understand that. But that's caring about other, again, not about self. So that's why we have so much trouble communicating. It's just not a problem we're easily going to fix, because that fear is really what controls us in our choices. And we need to turn that around to where it's that love that controls our choices. And our intellect hardly ever controls our choices, unless the choice is very straightforward, simple choices. But choices in relationship are never simple. They're always very complicated choices. Meaningful choices are usually complicated choices. Trivial choices, do I want, a blue ribbon or a yellow ribbon, well, maybe that's intellectual. Who cares? What's best going to go with my socks, or whatever. There's some intellectual reason for that. But meaningful things are almost always made from the feeling level.
Yes. And difficult because that's what helps us grow. So growth, if it was easy, we wouldn't be here.
Right. That's yeah, we wouldn't need this. We wouldn't need this experience, would we, if we were already
Yeah.
grown up? But we're here for a reason, and that's to solve these problems. But I think if we just had the courage to try to be a little more open, try to be a little more interested
Mm.
in other people and their feelings, and try not to judge other people by our own experience. Just let them be however they are, and accept them as that's the way they are, without judging them or trying to fix them. If we would just do that just a little bit, I think we'd find that all our relationships would get better.
All right. Well, another great Love Month show. Packed hour of truth. And very good
Yeah.
understanding of the human quandaries that we go through as we're trying to grow on this planet and expand through love. You've been listening to News of the Heart. We've been getting to the heart of what matters with Tom Campbell and love communication. Something like that. We'll be back next month. Thanks, Tom, as always.
You're welcome, Laurie.